In the beautiful city of Kitwe, there lived a young man named Solomon. Solomon had a very strong desire for sex. Every night, he felt the urge to find a girl on the streets and take her home with him. He couldn't seem to resist this temptation, and it became a regular part of his routine. He never liked spending a night alone, so he found companionship in this way. Despite being 32 years old and successful in his career, Solomon struggled with a very strong desire for sex. He took his work very seriously and had achieved financial stability, but this aspect of his personal life really troubled him. Although his friends suggested that he settles down and starts a family, Solomon had reservations. He dreamt of marrying a virgin, but he believed it was nearly impossible to find one in the city where he lived. He noticed that many people around were involved in activities like prostitution and casual hookups. On the other side of the city, in a small village called Solwezi, there lived two poor orphaned sisters named Camilla and Mwanza. They struggled to navigate through life, and life was so hard for them. Camilla and Mwanza were two strikingly similar sisters who had been orphaned and relied on each other for support. While they shared a close resemblance, Camilla was 26 years old and Mwanza was just 24 years old. Despite their bond, their path in life was very different. Camilla engaged in prostitution to make ends meet for herself and her sister, while Mwanza was always home trying to look for the best possible way to help out at home because she didn't want to seek that kind of lifestyle. Camilla got really sick one day with malaria and she couldn't do her job anymore. She asked Mwanza to do it instead, but Mwanza said no because she didn't want to have sex with strangers. This made Camilla really mad because she needed the money. She felt like her sister was letting her down. This made Camilla really mad because she felt like Mwanza was not helping them survive like they had planned. Camilla got even more upset and told Mwanza she had to go out to work or move out of the tiny village home they used to stay in. Mwanza didn't want to leave, but she stayed firm and said she wouldn't change her mind because she wanted to keep her virginity and stick to her beliefs and morals. Reluctantly, Mwanza gave in to Camilla's demands. As she got ready to leave, Camilla dressed her in her own clothes, necklaces, bracelets, and earrings before she left. Mwanza dressed in very revealing clothes. She stood by the roadside. While she stood on the roadside, an expensive car pulled up in front of her, and it was Solomon. He asked her how much for a night, and Mwanza, still feeling bitter, reluctantly named the price. Then he invited her to get into the car. Inside the car, Solomon began to touch Mwanza's legs, complimenting her beauty. Despite her irritation, she tried to smile, though her true feelings were evident in her expression. When they arrived at the hotel, Mwanza felt very nervous. Solomon suggested they go to a club to have fun before heading to the room, but Mwanza didn't agree. However, Solomon promised to pay her more money, so she reluctantly accepted. In the club, Solomon offered Mwanza a drink, but she refused because she doesn't drink and she doesn't know much about these kinds of places. Solomon insisted, and eventually Mwanza felt pressured to drink. Mwanza's main reason for being there in the first place was to avoid being kicked out of the house by her sister. Solomon noticed Mwanza's hesitant and timid behavior, and he assumed she was new to this kind of work. Mwanza became very drunk that night and she couldn't function properly. Seeing this, Solomon decided to take her to the room he had arranged for himself and her. He gently placed her on the bed and then left to freshen up himself. Solomon entered the room and tried to wake Mwanza up, but she wasn't responding well due to being heavily intoxicated. He then proceeded to undress both himself and her. Mwanza, in her intoxicated state, managed to protest against Solomon's advances, telling him she was a virgin. However, Solomon dismissed her words, thinking she was just talking because she was drunk. He continued trying to be intimate with her, but Mwanza kept repeating that she was a virgin. Mwanza cried out, "I'm not a prostitute. I just needed this money so my sister won't send me away from her house." Frustrated, Solomon insisted she stops talking and eventually raised his voice, telling her that her payment is on the table and to be quiet. Mwanza finally complied, and Solomon proceeded with his actions despite her continued objections. Solomon had never kissed the street girls before. He just went directly inside them without any type of romance. But this time, he felt like kissing Mwanza. He felt she was special and admired her beautiful face. He kissed and romanced Mwanza. Then he went inside her, though while wearing protection. It was his first time enjoying sex. Her body was tight, not loose like other girls he had been with before. He enjoyed himself before they both slept off. Solomon woke up in the morning expecting to see Mwanza beside him, but she wasn't there. Confused, he looked around the room, but Mwanza was nowhere to be found. As Solomon got out of bed, he noticed bloodstains everywhere, in the sheets, on his body, and around the room. Shocked and alarmed, he realized the significance of the stains and what had likely occurred during the night. Despite his initial admiration for Mwanza, Solomon felt really bad because he realized Mwanza was telling the truth about being a virgin. He regretted taking her virginity for money. As he walked to the bathroom, he saw Mwanza's necklace she left behind. Solomon felt really bad about what happened with Mwanza. He knew he had to find her and apologize, so he quickly got dressed and left the hotel to look for her. Meanwhile, Mwanza woke up feeling confused and ashamed. She left the hotel in a hurry, not wanting to see Solomon or anyone else from that night again. Feeling really down, Mwanza went home. She decided to give back the money Solomon had given her to her sister, Camilla. Camilla felt happy seeing the huge amount because nobody had ever paid her so much for one night's work, even though her sister's face showed she was hurting. Mwanza hissed in pain as she walked slowly, feeling discomfort from her encounter with Solomon. She went into the bathroom to take a bath. Seeing her sister's discomfort, Camilla laughed and told her she'd get used to it if she kept doing that kind of work. From the bathroom, Mwanza rejected Camilla's suggestion firmly, saying she would never do it again. She cried in the shower, feeling cheap and ashamed of what happened the previous night. Meanwhile, Solomon ran to the streets with the necklace, hoping to find Mwanza. But his search was unsuccessful, so he decided to go back home and get ready for work. At work, Solomon couldn't shake off the memory of Mwanza pleading with him, saying she just needed money and wasn't a street girl. The guilt weighed heavily on him, making him restless throughout the day. After work, he hurried to the spot where he had picked Mwanza up, hoping to find her there, but she wasn't there to be seen. Desperate to find her, Solomon described Mwanza to other girls working in the area, but none of them knew her. Solomon realized he didn't know Mwanza's name, phone number, or even where she lived. The only clue he had was the necklace she had left behind in the hotel room. For 2 whole weeks, Solomon searched for Mwanza, and it was the hardest time he'd ever faced in his lifetime. Even though he usually couldn't go a night without being with a woman, he managed to stay away from that for 2 weeks. Mwanza's beauty, her clear skin, and her innocence stuck in Solomon's mind. After his unsuccessful efforts to find Mwanza, Solomon decided to return to his normal routine. One evening, coming back from work, he picked up another street girl from the streets and took her to a hotel. But as soon as she tried to get close to him, it was like he was seeing Mwanza, and he smiled. But when the new girl touched him, he realized she was different and he felt really irritated. This reaction was really unlike Solomon. As Mwanza's image clouded his mind, he offered the street girl money to go home and he decided to hang out with his friends instead. While Solomon was with his friends, he felt down but couldn't bring himself to admit that he was in love with a girl he met on the streets. He knew his friends would tease him about it. One of his friends, Luca, noticed Solomon's mood and tried to cheer him up. When Luca showed him a photo of a beautiful girl on Facebook, Solomon wasn't interested at first, but Luca insisted. When Solomon looked at the photo, he saw Camilla wearing the same necklace that Mwanza had left behind. He asked Luca to send him the screenshot of Camilla's profile. Later, when Solomon was home, he checked Camilla's profile and saw a picture of her that looked a lot like Mwanza, wearing the same necklace. He felt like he had finally found the person he had been looking for more than 2 weeks. Since Camilla's phone number was on her profile, Solomon decided to take note of it. He tried calling Camilla, but she couldn't answer the call. Solomon decided he would try calling her again the next day when he went to work. The next day at work, Solomon called Camilla again and she finally picked up. "Hello," Camilla answered. "Hi, it's Solomon," he said. "I'm really sorry about what happened the other night. I took your virginity just for money, and I feel very terrible about it. I want to see you again and give you back the necklace you left behind." Camilla cleverly realizing Solomon was referring to her sister Mwanza. She played along. She asked Solomon how he got her number and he explained he found it on Facebook. They agreed to meet at a mall to exchange the necklace. At the mall, Solomon and Camilla met up. Although he noticed some differences with Camilla compared to Mwanza, her face was the same. He apologized again and urged her not to go back to the streets. Camilla explained that she had to due to her aunt's demands. "My aunt will send me out of the house if I don't go to the streets," Camilla replied. "I have nowhere else to go or stay." In response, Solomon offered her enough money to find accommodation and start a business so she wouldn't have to return to the streets. Grateful, Camilla accepted and Solomon gave her a check for a large amount of money before they said their goodbyes. When Solomon got home, he felt a difference in his connection with Camilla compared to Mwanza. He couldn't shake the feeling that Camilla seemed more exposed. After thinking it over, he assumed it was because they hadn't seen each other over a long time. Camilla went home feeling incredibly excited. "I've hit the jackpot," she said to herself. "Not only will I not have to live here, but I'll also be able to get a shop and have a handsome and wealthy guy like Solomon." Camilla was on top of the world. A few days later, she started packing her things in the house. When Mwanza asked where she was going, Camilla replied aggressively, "I'm finding my own way. I can't keep staying in this dirty place." Mwanza pleaded with her to at least tell her where she was going, but she refused to share any details. Camilla moved to a new house out of the village and Mwanza was left there all alone, suffering. Camilla started a big clothing and jewelry business. Solomon continues to communicate with Camilla over the phone, and he was happy to hear that she was doing well. However, he still felt like something was missing. Solomon decided to take Camilla to his house and showed her where he lived. And to her surprise, he lived alone. Camilla's eyes widened and she smiled to herself, realizing that her life had changed for the better. Solomon continues to support Camilla financially so that she wouldn't lack anything at all. One day, Solomon arrived at work to find his office in a mess. He called his secretary to inquire why the cleaner hadn't shown up, only to learn that the cleaner had stopped coming. The secretary had quickly tidied up the office herself. Solomon instructed her to put up a notice outside the office for the position of a cleaner. Meanwhile, Mwanza had been searching for a job outside of her village near the city because it was difficult for her to make ends meet since Camilla had left her. When she saw the signboard advertising the cleaner position at Solomon's office, she wasted no time and applied for the job. The secretary asked her to start work the next day. Mwanza resumed work late the next day and quickly began sweeping the office. When Solomon entered and saw his dusty table, he instructed his secretary to call the new cleaner to clean his table and mop the floor, which she did. As Solomon turned to make a phone call, Mwanza entered the office to clean the table and chairs. In the process, she accidentally knocked over a file, causing both her and Solomon to bend down to pick it up. Their heads collided, and when they looked at each other, they recognized each other's faces. Shocked to see Solomon, Mwanza tried to run from the office, but Solomon stopped her by holding her waist from behind. Mwanza apologized, saying she was sorry for being late. Solomon saw the innocence on her face, the same innocence he had seen the night they had met. Feeling a deep connection as he touched her, Solomon realized there was something special about Mwanza. He asked her why she was there, after he had opened a big shop for her. Mwanza simply replied, "I'm sorry, sir. Please let me go." While James demanded answers from Mwanza, Camilla called him. They talked while Mwanza was in front of him. After the call, Solomon seemed shocked and asked Mwanza who she was. Mwanza, shivering with fear, pleaded with him to let her go. Solomon assured her that he wouldn't hurt her and persuaded her to sit down. He then asked her if she had a twin, but Mwanza replied that she only had an elder sister who looked exactly like her, and people often mistook them for twins. Still surprised, Solomon asked for her name and she replied, "Mwanza." Solomon then showed her the photo Luca had sent him earlier. "This necklace, you forgot it in the hotel room. Is this not you wearing the necklace in this photo?" Solomon asked. Mwanza replied, "That's my elder sister. How did you get her photo on your phone?" Solomon replied, "Never mind," and shifted closer to the chair where Mwanza was sitting. He apologized sincerely for hurting her that night and explained that he had been searching for her ever since. He acknowledged that he had made a mistake by taking her virginity in such a way, and he asked Mwanza to give him a chance to make things right. Mwanza insisted that he hadn't done anything wrong because he had paid for the services. But Solomon continued to plead for her forgiveness. He then asked for her phone number, but Mwanza didn't have a phone. When he requested her address, she explained that the place didn't have an address. Despite their conversation, Mwanza expressed her desire to continue her work because she had other offices to clean. Solomon picked up the rag and threw it away, telling Mwanza that she wouldn't work as a cleaner anymore. He then took her out to buy a phone and accompanied her back home. When they arrived, Solomon noticed photos of Mwanza and Camilla on the wall and the poor condition of the room. As he was going through the photos, the landlord arrived to throw Mwanza's belongings out of the house because she had owned rent for almost 5 months. Despite Solomon's attempt to reason with the landlord, he refused to listen. In response, Solomon gathered Mwanza's belongings and took her to his own home. Mwanza had many emotions when she moved in with Solomon. She was grateful for his help, but she also felt a little too much to handle. Solomon really wanted to assist Mwanza however he could. He noticed that Mwanza seemed uncomfortable staying there for even just a day. So he decided to find her a better place to stay. He called his lawyer to help arrange for the house. While Solomon was talking to his lawyer, Mwanza walked in unexpectedly. Solomon quickly ended the call and told the lawyer he would call back. Curious, Mwanza asked why Solomon was doing so much for her when she had nothing to offer in return. Solomon reassured her that he didn't expect anything in return and just wanted her to relax. But Mwanza, feeling uncertain, suggested that if Solomon brought her here just to be intimate with her, then she couldn't stay. Solomon responded firmly, saying he called his lawyer to find her a better place for accommodation. He confessed his feelings for Mwanza, saying that he liked her a lot and he was even in love with her. However, he emphasized that he wouldn't force her to accept his feelings. Instead, he promised to assist her regardless of their relationship status. The next day, Solomon and Mwanza went to see different apartments. Solomon said he would pay for whichever one Mwanza liked best. They visited a few places, but Mwanza didn't like any of them. Even though the apartments they saw were all nice and costly, Mwanza felt like she could trust Solomon. She felt safe around him and started thinking about staying with him in his house. Solomon and Mwanza went back to his house. He promised they would go apartment hunting again the next day so she could choose one she liked. But Mwanza surprised him by saying she wanted to stay in the house. She asked him to promise not to be physical with her. Solomon smiled with excitement and said, "I'm grateful you trust me. I won't come close except you want me to." Mwanza smiled and replied, "So you still want to get close with my consent?" Solomon responded sarcastically, saying, "Yes, because I love you so much. You changed me. Since that day we met in the hotel, I stopped womanizing. I couldn't go a day without touching a woman, but you indirectly and directly turned me away from all women." Solomon was curious about Mwanza's background, so he asked her to share more about herself. He wanted to know where she grew up, about her family, and what happened that made her end up on the streets that day. Mwanza shared with Solomon that both her parents had passed away a while back, leaving her with just her elder sister. Life in their village was tough, so they decided to move to the city to try to make a living. They had a plan to work hard, but unfortunately, her sister ended up on the streets. Despite this, her sister always took care of the bills. However, on the day Mwanza ended up on the streets, her sister was sick and unable to work. She felt pressure to go out and hustle to make ends meet. Her sister even threatened to kick her out if she couldn't go. With nowhere else to turn, Mwanza had no choice but to join her sister on the street. As Mwanza recounted her story, tears welled up in her eyes. Solomon felt a wave of empathy for her and put her into a comforting embrace as he cried while sharing her difficult experience. Mwanza also asked Solomon why he was womanizing. He explained that many women were interested in him because of his money, and some even deceived him. Since then, he felt that instead of being with women who were only interested in his wealth, it would be better to pick girls from the streets. He believed that they might be more genuine and not after his money. Mwanza comforted Solomon, and they shared a comforting hug. Meanwhile, it had been a week since Camilla had been trying to reach Solomon. But he refused to answer her calls because he knew she was an imposter. Despite his avoidance, Camilla decided to pay him a visit at his house. Mwanza and Solomon had become good friends after their heart-to-heart talk. Mwanza felt safer with him, and he appreciated her trust. One day, while they were relaxing at Solomon's house, there was a knock on the door. Solomon went to answer it, and to Mwanza's surprise, it was Camilla. Camilla looked shocked to see Mwanza in Solomon's house. She looked at Mwanza suspiciously. "Why are you here?" she asked sharply. Mwanza felt scared. "I am staying with Solomon," she said quietly. Camilla softened a little but still seemed angry. "Why?" she asked. Mwanza glanced at Solomon for help. "Solomon is helping me find a place to stay," she explained. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." Camilla seemed a bit calmer. Then she turned to Solomon, looking angry again. "Why did you bring her here?" she demanded. Solomon sighed. "I'm helping Mwanza," he said. "She needed a place to stay." Solomon, with a serious look, "Since you left her and you are pretending to be her," he said. Mwanza furrowed her brows in confusion. Pretending to be her? She asked, puzzled. Solomon explained how Camilla had pretended to be Mwanza, but he was relieved that he finally found the real Mwanza. Before Mwanza could fully understand, Camilla tried to pull her away, insisting they go to her house, but Mwanza refused and Solomon stepped in to protect her. "Leave her alone, Camilla," Solomon said firmly. Camilla glared at Mwanza, threatening to deal with her later, before storming out of the house, feeling furious that Mwanza might take Solomon away from her. When Camilla got home, she decided to visit her uncles and aunts in the village to seek their help in evicting Mwanza from Solomon's house. So, she journeyed to the village and lied to her relatives, who had never helped her or Mwanza before, to come and take Mwanza away from Solomon. They all agreed and arrived in the city, and Camilla took them to Solomon's house, but unfortunately he wasn't there. Mwanza opened the door and welcomed them in. The aunts and uncles entered the house, knowing Solomon would be a very rich man, so they wanted to strike a deal that would benefit them, not Camilla. The aunts and uncles spoke amongst themselves and agreed to wait for Solomon to return. However, Camilla was impatient and wanted them to forcefully remove Mwanza from the house. But because of their own selfish interests, they realized that if they took Mwanza out and Solomon returned without seeing her, he might file a police report against them. Mwanza decided to call Solomon to come home due to an emergency, and he rushed home only to find a lot of strangers in his house. He greeted them and they introduced themselves as Mwanza's paternal relatives. They told Solomon they came to take Mwanza away because it was against their tradition for a girl to stay in the same house with a man who wasn't her husband. Solomon replied, "I'm sorry about breaking your tradition, but I would really love to marry Mwanza." When Camilla heard this, she got very angry. The uncles and aunts replied to Solomon, "Now you are talking." They invited Solomon to their village to take the list for marrying arrangements. Camilla told her uncles and aunts that this wasn't the reason she invited them. She invited them to evict Mwanza from the house, but now they were arranging a marriage. Solomon promised Mwanza's family that he would come to their village in 3 days' time to take the list and make necessary arrangements. Mwanza's paternal family were happy and he gave them a large sum of money to cover their transportation expenses home. This made Camilla very angry and furious because her plans had backfired on her. After Camilla and her relatives left Solomon's house, Mwanza confronted him about why he had promised to go to a village and take the marriage list without asking for her consent first. Solomon replied, "That's the best thing I could think of." Mwanza became angry and stormed out of the sitting room after a heated argument with Solomon. Solomon went to her room to talk to her, expressing his deep feelings and desire to be her husband. He pleaded with her, telling her that he loved her and promised never to hurt her again. But Mwanza refused, and Solomon, feeling defeated, told her he would return to his old ways. He left her room, but Mwanza ran after him and held him from behind, telling him not to go. She refused that she really liked him too and had grown to love him. Finally, she agreed to marry him. Hearing Mwanza's words made Solomon incredibly happy. He hugged her tightly and kissed her forehead. Meanwhile, Camilla was at home worrying about what to do next since her plan had failed. She couldn't let Mwanza have such a rich man to herself, so she began plotting her next move. Camilla decided to call Mwanza on the phone to let her know how Solomon was hiding a very big secret from her. Mwanza demanded to know, but Camilla said she would give her the whole details later. But this information really got Mwanza worried. Mwanza and Solomon planned to visit her hometown to get the marriage list. Even though Mwanza was worried, Solomon took her to meet his uncle first and other family members. Mwanza liked spending time with Solomon's family. They also welcomed her as well.
When they started their journey to Mwanza's hometown, she couldn't stop worrying. She tried to be happy, but the fear stayed with her. Solomon tried to cheer her up, but she felt scared. One day, while Mwanza was out, Camilla called again. Her voice this time was very serious, and Mwanza knew something was wrong. Camilla told her that Solomon was hiding something big from her. He had HIV. Mwanza felt shocked and sad hearing this information, not knowing Solomon had kept this from her. She knew she had to talk to him and find out the truth. She couldn't believe it without hearing Solomon's side of the story. Once she got home, she hurried to Solomon's room to talk to him, but as she approached, she overheard him talking on the phone. He sounded very urgent, saying he needed medicine because he was very sick. Mwanza's heart sank as she listened in shock. She felt like Camilla's words had been confirmed, and she believed Solomon did really have HIV. Just like Camilla said, feeling betrayed and hurt, she quietly retreated to her room, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't believe that Solomon had kept such a big secret from her, especially after knowing he was sick. She felt like she had been kept in the dark, and the realization left her feeling broken and alone. Meanwhile, the medicine Solomon urgently needed was actually for his uncle, who was too unwell to accompany them for the marriage arrangements. Solomon worried about his uncle's health, explaining the urgency to the pharmacist, asking for the medicine as quickly as possible. However, Mwanza overheard only part of the conversation and she misunderstood everything. She assumed Solomon was referring to himself as being sick and urgently needing medicine. This misunderstanding deepened her belief that Solomon had been hiding his HIV status from her. Feeling hurt and betrayed, she couldn't bring herself to confront him about what she heard. She struggled with the weight of her emotions, torn between her love for him and the fear of what his secret might mean for their future together. Mwanza called Camilla and told her that Solomon was really having the virus. Even though Camilla knew it wasn't true, she acted like she believed Mwanza. Camilla told her to leave the house right away because she was worried Solomon might give her the virus. Feeling scared and confused, Mwanza agreed to leave that night. She promised to meet Camilla outside and they would run away together. Mwanza felt torn between her love for Solomon and her fear for her own safety. She knew leaving Solomon would be hard, but she was also afraid of what might happen if they stayed. Throughout the day, Mwanza acted distant and uneasy around Solomon. He noticed her strange behavior and asked her what was wrong, but Mwanza brushed it off and didn't say anything. As night fell, Mwanza quietly packed some of her belongings and headed towards the door, intending to leave without Solomon noticing. However, unknown to her, Solomon was outside making phone calls. Just as Mwanza reached the door, Solomon called out her name, startling her. He asked her where she was going with her bags at this late hour. Mwanza felt shocked and caught off guard, but she knew she couldn't hide the truth from Solomon any longer. With a heavy heart, Mwanza decided to confront him. She told him that she shouldn't marry him because he had lied to her and kept something very important. She accused him of having HIV and not telling her about it, despite their plans for marriage. "Mwanza, where did you hear that from?" said Solomon. "Why didn't you just ask me instead of leaving like this?" Mwanza replied, "Camilla told me. When I came to your room to ask you, I overheard you urgently asking for medicine on the phone, saying you were very sick." Solomon laughed. "That medicine was for my uncle. I only told the pharmacist so they could bring it quickly, so that my uncle could get well and join us for the wedding. You trust Camilla more than me. It's fine, you can go. If you believe I've been keeping things from you, just leave. I don't want to be with someone who doesn't trust me. I've shown you how much I care and love you, but you've taken me for granted." Mwanza felt the sincerity and hurt in Solomon's voice, realizing she needed to apologize. She tried to enter Solomon's room, but then Camilla called. Mwanza ignored the call and tried to turn off her phone. She went to Solomon's room to ask for forgiveness, but he told her to leave or he will leave instead. Mwanza approached him and hugged him from behind romantically, but Solomon remained upset. Mwanza turned Solomon around and hugged him, apologizing and promising that the incident won't happen again. She kissed his forehead and reassured him. Solomon responded saying a mere kiss on the forehead won't suffice. He needed more to forgive her. Mwanza, feeling shy, asked, "What more do you want?" Solomon held her cheeks and said, "I just want you to love me and trust me." Mwanza thought Solomon was going to talk about intimacy, but he actually said the opposite. Solomon assured her, "I won't force you. If you want us to be intimate, it will be with your consent." Mwanza grinned mischievously and said, "I give my consent, but you have to catch me first." With that, she dashed out of the room and Solomon ran after her. They played a game of hide and seek, and laughter was filling the air as they chased each other around the house. After a while, they both grew tired from the playful pursuit and settled down on the couch in the sitting room. Solomon and Mwanza sat close together on the couch, holding hands. Feeling a rush of affection, Mwanza leaned in and kissed Solomon softly. He responded with equal warmth, their lips meeting in a gentle embrace. Encouraged by her boldness, Mwanza guided Solomon's hand to her cheek. Relishing the touch, Solomon, drawn to her longing gaze, drew nearer, his kisses becoming more intense. Each kiss deepened their connection. Mwanza's heart raced as Solomon's hand explored her body tenderly, sending shivers down her spine. With whispered words of love, Mwanza led Solomon to the bedroom, their movements filled with passion and closeness as they gave in to their desires. Their love-making became a beautiful expression of their love and affection, each moment affirming their bond. Meanwhile, Camila grew tired of waiting for Mwanza outside Solomon's compound. Feeling frustrated and impatient, she decided to leave. Solomon woke up very early that day and he made something special for Mwanza. He decided to make breakfast for her. He went to the kitchen and found some eggs, breads, and fruits. He made scrambled eggs and toasts. He also cut some fruits to put on the side. After preparing the breakfast, he carried it carefully to his room. He wanted to surprise her with breakfast in bed. Mwanza was still asleep when he entered the room. Solomon gently woke her up and presented the breakfast to her. She was very surprised and delighted by Solomon's thoughtful gesture. They enjoyed the breakfast together in bed, starting their day with happiness. After they finished eating, Solomon told Mwanza that she should rest for a bit. He told her that he would come back later in the afternoon to pick her up. They had plans to go together to select outfits for their upcoming wedding. Solomon wanted Mwanza to feel refreshed and ready for their outing, so he encouraged her to take some time to relax before their shopping trip. Mwanza agreed, feeling grateful for Solomon's considerate nature, and settled back into bed for a little while longer. While Solomon on his way to work, he decided to call Camila and have a serious conversation with her. He warned her to stay away from Mwanza and him, as he sensed some tension building up between them. Camila responded by saying that the only way she would consider staying away from Mwanza was if Solomon paid her off. Shocked by Camila's demand, Solomon asked how much money she needed. To his disbelief, Camila replied that she also wanted to have a one-night stand with him, in addition to the money. Solomon was appalled and firmly rejected her proposal, telling her she was out of her mind. In a desperate attempt to manipulate Solomon, Camila threatened that if he didn't agree to her terms, he wouldn't be able to marry Mwanza. She even went as far as claiming that Solomon should be grateful to her. If she hadn't forced Mwanza outside that night, he wouldn't have had the chance to see her. Feeling frustrated and angry, Solomon couldn't help but express his disappointment in Camila's behavior. He reminded her that instead of being happy for her sister, she is turning herself into a villain by trying to control their lives in such a manipulative way. Solomon let out a sigh and hissed, and he ended the call. Camila called Solomon back. This time, she changed her mind and didn't just want a one night with him anymore. Instead, she wanted Solomon to make her pregnant and give her money so she could leave town. Camila said no one would marry her because everyone knew about her past on the streets. She blamed Mwanza for wanting to leave her behind now that she found someone rich. Camila threatened to make Solomon and Mwanza's lives unhappy if he didn't agree. Solomon was very angry. He told Camilla to leave him alone, and he said he wouldn't give her anything. He wanted her to stay away from Mwanza. Then he ended the call. Later that afternoon, Solomon arrived to pick up Mwanza. They went shopping for things they needed for the wedding. On the day of the wedding, Solomon made sure there were security measures in place to prevent anything from going wrong. Despite Camilla's attempts to sabotage the wedding, Solomon's security measures thwarted all her plans. The wedding proceeded smoothly and Solomon and Mwanza were successfully married. They returned to the city as a happily married couple. Camilla was deeply hurt by Solomon marrying Mwanza. Fueled by anger, she began to destroy everything in her house. She felt betrayed, thinking, I sacrificed so much for Mwanza and now I have neither a man nor money. It would be better if Solomon dies so we could be even. She vowed not to let them be happy, believing that if she had no husband, Mwanza shouldn't have one either. With a bitter laugh, she expressed her resentment. Meanwhile, the newly wedded couple enjoyed their moments of happiness together as they celebrated their marriage. The following day, Mwanza woke up feeling very scared. She had a very bad dream and she dreamt that her husband Solomon got killed. She shouted out loud and Solomon woke up too. He asked her what was wrong and Mwanza hugged him tight and said she had a scary dream where he got killed. She didn't want him to go out that day, so she just wanted him to stay with her. Solomon hugged her back and told her not to worry. He said it was just a dream and he had to go to work. It had been a month since they got married and he needed to earn money after spending a lot on the wedding. Even though Mwanza didn't want him to go, Solomon had to leave. He promised to come back safely. Mwanza watched him go, feeling sad but hoping he would be okay. Solomon got into his car and started driving to the office. Along the way, he spotted two men fighting in the middle of the road. He honked his horn, hoping they would stop, but they ignored him. Feeling concerned, Solomon decided to step out of his car to intervene and separate them. However, he didn't realize that these men were actually goons hired by Camilla. As Solomon approached them, the goons revealed guns hidden in their pockets and threatened to shoot him if he didn't follow them. Terrified, Solomon complied and followed them. They led him to a secluded area in the bush. Once they were alone, the goons mercilessly beat Solomon up while Camilla watched, laughing at his plight. Solomon pleaded with Camilla, begging her to spare his life for Mwanza's sake. But Camilla, fueled by anger and resentment, coldly refused. She declared that if she couldn't be happy, then Mwanza shouldn't be either. With Solomon pleading for mercy falling on deaf ears, the goons dug a shallow grave and buried him alive. Camilla and the goons then left the bush, leaving Solomon trapped and fighting for his life beneath the earth. Two people passing by saw what was happening. They immediately rushed to the grave and started digging Solomon out after Camilla and the goons left. They walked quickly, knowing that time was running out. Finally, they managed to free Solomon from the makeshift grave and carried him to a nearby hospital as fast as they could. In the hospital, doctors and nurses worked urgently to save Solomon's life. They treated his injuries and worked to stabilize him. Despite the severity of his condition, they were determined to do everything they could to ensure that Solomon survived. As Solomon lay in the hospital bed fighting for his life, Mwanza was really worried at home. She couldn't stop thinking about the scary dream she had. She tried calling Solomon, but he didn't answer. So she went to his office, but they told her he wasn't there. This made Mwanza even more worried. She felt like something bad might have happened to Solomon. She decided she had to find out where he was and what was going on. Mwanza called Solomon's uncle and shared her worries with him, telling him about the scary dream she had. She explained that she couldn't reach Solomon because his phones were off, and he wasn't at home or work either. He wasn't at home or at work either. Solomon's uncles tried to calm her down and told her to wait until evening for news. But as the evening came with no word from Solomon, Mwanza's anxiety became unbearable. She and Solomon's uncle decided to go to the police station to report his disappearance. Meanwhile, Camilla celebrated her victory, knowing that she had caused pain and suffering from Mwanza. Mwanza couldn't sleep all night because she was worried about her missing husband. She called Camilla to tell her what happened, hoping for some comfort, but Camilla pretended to be sympathetic, even though she was secretly happy that Solomon was gone. The next morning, the police told Mwanza they found Solomon's car on the road, but he wasn't there. This made Mwanza even more scared. She cried and blamed herself for not convincing Solomon to stay home. Meanwhile, Solomon woke up in the hospital after 4 days of being unconscious. When Solomon woke up, he immediately thought about Mwanza. He was worried if she was okay. He wanted to get up, but the nurse said he needed to rest. So he asked the nurse if he could use her phone to call his uncle. Solomon called his uncle and told him everything about what happened to him. He asked his uncle to make sure Mwanza was safe. His uncle actually said Mwanza was currently with him at his house. Solomon begged his uncle to keep Mwanza safe and not let her leave because he thought she might be in danger. He also asked his uncle not to tell anyone where he was until he got better and could go home. After the call, Solomon asked the nurse how he ended up in the hospital. The nurse explained that some people had brought him in. They had found him buried alive, but thankfully they had saved him just in time. Solomon was grateful and wanted to thank them personally. He asked the nurse if he could meet them, but she said she would let him know if they came around. Solomon nodded, relieved to know he had been rescued and eager to express his gratitude to his rescuers. That evening, Camilla called Mwanza to ask if there was any news about Solomon. Mwanza replied that there was no news yet. This made Camilla very happy, but she pretended to be concerned and comforted Mwanza. She promised to visit her soon. However, Mwanza mentioned that she was staying at her in-laws' place, not at home, in case Camilla wanted to come over. Camilla assured Mwanza that she would visit her whenever she returned home. After hanging up the call, Camilla couldn't contain her excitement. Seeing Mwanza sad brought her joy. "You want to enjoy when I sacrificed my body for you to eat?" she muttered to herself. After a month of recovery, Solomon returned to his base. He visited his uncle's place secretly at night, and when Mwanza saw him, she couldn't contain her joy. It was as if her life had returned back to her body. She hugged Solomon tightly and asked him why he had left her like that. Solomon explained everything that had happened to him, detailing Camilla and her accomplices' actions. Hearing this from Solomon, Mwanza was shocked that her own sister could do such a thing to her husband. After much talking, she took Solomon to her room in her in-laws' house. There, she gave Solomon good news. She was actually expecting their child. This news brought additional joy to Solomon's mind. He hugged her close, feeling safe and loved. The next day, Solomon, his uncle, and the police went to Camilla's house to capture her. When Camilla saw Solomon, she was shocked to see him alive. She asked Solomon how he had survived, but he just hissed in response and distracted the police to take her away. Despite her attempts to flee, the police managed to capture her. She then led the police to where her accomplices were hiding. The police apprehended them all. The case was taken to court, and after much deliberation, Camilla and her accomplices were sentenced to life in prison without parole. Justice was served, and Solomon could finally rest, assured that they would never be able to harm anyone else again. Camilla's regrets came too late, and she realized she was in the wrong place. Despite feeling remorse for her actions, she understood that her regret couldn't undo the harm she had caused. Now facing the consequences of her choices, she grappled with the weight of her decisions. However, it was a harsh lesson learned too late, and she had to come to terms with the irreversible consequences of her actions. After some months, Mwanza welcomed a beautiful bouncing baby boy, who was a carbon copy of his dad, Solomon. Overjoyed by their new addition to the family, Solomon couldn't help but appreciate Mwanza for entering his life and transforming him from a womanizer into a more responsible person. In return, Solomon surprised Mwanza with a luxurious shop fully stocked with goods. Mother was overwhelmed with joy and gratitude, thanking Solomon for coming into her life and helping her become a better person. She appreciated that Solomon didn't judge her from their one-night stand, but instead supported her and stood by her side through thick and thin. Together, they embraced their new roles as parents and cherished the love and bond they shared as a family.
Once upon a time, in a big, bright village lived Simbi. Simbi was very rich and pretty. She had a big house, lots of shiny clothes, and many sparkly jewels. Her father gave her all this money before he went to the stars. Everyone in the village said, "Wow," when they saw her. But Simbi was a bit different. She liked to be with people who had lots of money like her. She didn't play with those who had less. Even when they smiled at her, she sometimes didn't smile back. Her father was not like that. He was nice to everyone and shared his money. People loved him very much. They still liked Simbi, hoping she'd be like her father one day. Simbi didn't think about getting married. Her mother said, "Simbi, you're not getting younger. Find someone nice." But Simbi would shake her head. She said, "No, I want someone very special. He must have more money than me, be super nice, and never been married." People whispered, "Who could that be? No one is like that here." So Simbi waited and waited, thinking about the man who would be just right for her. She believed somewhere, somehow, she'd find him. But for now, she enjoyed her riches, her big house, and her shiny things, not ready to share them with anyone yet. One sunny day, Simbi met Mazi. Mazi was from another village not too far away. He was rich, just like Simbi. He also got his riches from his family, just like she did. Simbi liked him because he was rich. Mazi liked her too. So they decided to get married and live together. At first, everything was sweet and happy. They laughed, ate yummy food, and lived in a big, cozy house. Simbi and Mazi seemed perfect for each other. But after a while, things started to change. Simbi liked to make all the decisions. She wanted to be the boss. When Mazi said, "Let's do this," Simbi would often say, "No, we do it my way." She thought because she was rich and a bit older, she should be in charge. One day, Mazi had to go on a trip. He told Simbi, "Please stay home till I come back." But Simbi didn't listen. She went out to play with her friends and traveled far away without telling Mazi. When Mazi came back, he found the house quiet and empty. He asked, "Where is Simbi?" The worker said, "She left to have fun with her friends." Mazi waited for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Then Simbi came back. Mazi was very upset. "Where did you go?" he asked. Simbi didn't like the question. "Why do you ask?" "I can go where I want," she said. They argued loud and long. Mazi said, "You should respect me. I am still the head of this house." But Simbi didn't agree. She was angry. "I don't need to listen to you. Any man cannot control my life," she said. And with that, Simbi packed her bags and went back to her own village, leaving Mazi and their home behind. She was single again, back in her big house, thinking about what happened. People in the village whispered about Simbi and Mazi, wondering what would happen next. Simbi's mother was sad too. She said, "No marriage is perfect, Simbi." But Simbi didn't want to hear it. She thought she would just find another man, a better one this time. After leaving Mazi, Simbi met Ayo. Ayo wasn't rich like Mazi or Simbi, but he had a big heart. He was the kindest man in the village. Simbi thought, "Well, he is very caring. That's one thing I wanted." So Simbi and Ayo decided to get married. Since Ayo wasn't as rich, he had to move into Simbi's big house. He did everything to make Simbi happy. He cooked yummy meals, cleaned the house till it sparkled, and even gave Simbi foot rubs after her long days. Ayo would sometimes buy Simbi pretty dresses with the little money he had. He always said, "I just want you to smile, Simbi." For a while, Simbi loved it. She was happy she could control him. It was as if Simbi was the husband and Ayo was the wife. She felt like a queen. Ayo was always there, making sure she was comfortable and happy. But soon, Simbi started to feel something was missing. Simbi saw that Ayo didn't bring in any money. He spent his days making sure she was happy, but the big house and shiny things needed money to stay. Simbi thought, Ayo is nice, very caring, but he's too lazy. He never contributed much to the family. Instead, all he does is just sit and enjoy her own labor. Then one evening, Simbi sat down with Ayo. She said, "You are very kind, Ayo, but kindness doesn't fill our pots with food or keep this house." Ayo felt sad. He wanted to make Simbi happy, but he didn't know how without money. Simbi's mother talked to her. "Simbi, you have to choose. Do you want Ayo's kindness or someone who brings in money? A man who has so much time to care all day and night would barely have much time for work, my dear." Simbi thought hard. Finally, she said, "I need more than kindness." So Simbi told Ayo, "You need to leave. You're not the husband I need." Ayo was very sad, but he packed his bags and left. Simbi was alone again. She had everything she wanted in her big house, but she wasn't happy. She missed Ayo's kindness but wanted more. The villagers whispered, "Simbi has sent another husband away. What will she do now?" After Ayo left, Simbi felt a bit lonely. But then she met Kofi. Kofi was like a dream, everything she had wanted in a man. He was handsome. He was rich, very rich. He was also kind and caring, and he had never been married. Simbi thought, wow, Kofi is just perfect. So Simbi and Kofi got married, and it seemed like Simbi finally found her perfect match. Kofi was everything Simbi wanted. He bought her beautiful things, took her to fun places, and always made sure she was smiling. They danced, they laughed, and their house was full of joy. Simbi felt very lucky. But after some time, things started to change again. Kofi was nice and all, but Simbi sometimes forgot to be nice back. She didn't say please or thank you. She didn't cook or clean. She thought, Kofi loves me, so I don't need to do these things. Kofi had friends and family who would come over. Simbi didn't greet them nicely. She just said hello without smiling. Kofi's family was very important to him, especially his parents. But Simbi didn't visit them or help them. She said, "Why should I? They can take care of themselves." Kofi's parents noticed this. They said, "Kofi, a wife should be kind and respectful, not just to her husband, but to his family too." They were upset. They told Kofi, "Simbi isn't right for our family." Kofi was sad, but he knew his family was right. He loved Simbi, but he also knew respect and kindness were important. So Kofi talked to Simbi. He said, "We can't be together if you don't respect me and my family." Simbi was shocked. She didn't expect this, but Kofi had made up his mind. Simbi packed her things and went back to her village, alone again. Back home, Simbi thought about Kofi. She had everything she wanted, but she still wasn't happy. She started to wonder, maybe it's not just about finding the perfect husband. Maybe I need to be a better wife too. But it was too late for her and Kofi. Because when Simbi came back to her village after leaving Kofi, she got a big surprise. A flood had come and washed away a lot of the village, including the farms that made Simbi so rich. Suddenly, Simbi didn't have all her money anymore. Her big house didn't feel so big when there was no food to eat or money to spend. Simbi and her mother had to leave their big house. They moved into a small hut, much smaller than anywhere Simbi had ever lived. At first, Simbi felt very sad. She missed her soft bed, her shiny things, and her beautiful clothes. Now, she wore simple dresses and helped her mother cook with whatever food they could find. Living in the small hut, Simbi started to think a lot. She remembered Mazi, Ayo, and Kofi. She thought about how she acted with them. I had 3 good husbands, she said to herself, but I wasn't a good wife. I wanted to be the boss with Mazi. I didn't value Ayo's kindness, and I didn't respect Kofi or his family. Simbi saw that she had been looking for the perfect husband without thinking about what it means to be a good wife. I was not nice, Simbi realized. I did not share or help. I only thought about what I wanted. In the small hut, Simbi learned to live with less. She talked to her neighbors, the ones she had ignored when she was rich. They were nice to her. They shared their food and stories. Simbi started to help others too. She shared whatever she and her mother had. Simbi's heart began to change in the small hut. She learned to say please and thank you. She learned to listen and not always be the boss. She found out that being rich with money wasn't the same as being rich in heart. One day, Simbi said to her mother, "I was wrong. It wasn't my husband's fault. It was mine. I forgot to be kind and respectful." Her mother hugged her. She was happy to see Simbi understanding. Living simply, Simbi learned a big lesson. She discovered that being happy doesn't need lots of money or being in charge. Happiness comes from being kind, sharing, and respecting others. Simbi was ready to be not just rich but also a good person. As Simbi started to live her new, simpler life, she met someone unexpected. His name was Gogo. Gogo was very different from the men Simbi had married before. He wasn't rich and he had been married once. He didn't match any of the things Simbi used to want in a husband. But there was something special about Gogo. He was kind, he laughed a lot, and he cared about Simbi in a way no one had before. Simbi and Gogo became friends. They talked, they helped each other, and they laughed together. Simbi liked how Gogo made her feel. She didn't worry about being rich or being in charge. With Gogo, she was just Simbi. One day Gogo asked Simbi if she would marry him. Simbi thought about it. Gogo didn't have a lot of money. He wasn't what she had always said she wanted. But Simbi realized those things weren't what made her happy. Being cared for, sharing laughs, and helping each other, that's what made her happy. So Simbi said yes to Gogo. They got married and started their life together in the small hut. It was a happy life, simpler than Simbi's life before, but fuller in many ways. Gogo and Simbi didn't have much, but they had each other. They shared everything they had and worked together to make their little home a place of love and laughter. Simbi was loyal to Gogo. She didn't look for someone richer or more powerful. She learned to appreciate what she had. Gogo and Simbi respected each other. They listened when the other spoke, and they helped each other without needing to be asked. Their neighbors saw how happy Simbi and Gogo were. They saw how Simbi had changed. She was kinder, she smiled more, and she helped others. Simbi had grown. She learned that happiness didn't come from having the most money or being in charge. Happiness came from sharing life with someone who cared, from being kind, and from being content with what you have. Simbi and Gogo's marriage was not like the stories of riches and palaces. It was a story of true happiness, found in a small hut, with simple clothes and simple food. But it was their story, and it was filled with love. Simbi finally found what she was looking for, not in wealth or power, but in a heart that matched hers. In the quiet of a beautiful evening, Simbi sat outside her small hut, looking at the stars. She thought about her long journey, from the days of living in a big house with lots of shiny things to now, living simply with Gogo. Her heart was full. Simbi remembered how she once thought that having a husband who was rich, caring, and never married would make her happy. She had married Mazi, Ayo, and Kofi, looking for happiness in what they could give her or how they made her feel. But each time, something was missing. It wasn't until everything changed, until she lost her wealth and lived a simpler life, that Simbi found true happiness. With Gogo, Simbi learned that happiness wasn't about being rich or being in charge. Happiness was about sharing, understanding, and loving. She learned that no marriage is perfect. Every relationship has its challenges, but it's how you face those challenges together that matters. It's about understanding each other, making compromises, and being there for one another. Simbi realized her mistakes. She saw that she had been looking for perfection in her husbands without being willing to give the same in return. She understood that a happy marriage isn't about finding someone who meets all your criteria, but about building a life together where both partners feel valued and loved. As Simbi looked at the stars, she felt grateful for her journey. It had taught her about the true meaning of love and happiness. She was thankful for Gogo, for his love, and for the life they shared together. The moral of Simbi's story is clear. No marriage is 100% complete. What makes a marriage perfect is not finding the perfect person, but finding someone you can grow with, understand, and compromise with to build a strong, loving relationship. Happiness comes not from seeking perfection in others, but from appreciating what you have, and from the love and understanding you share together. Simbi's story is a reminder that the key to a happy life and a happy marriage lies not in the wealth or status of your partner, but in the love, respect, and understanding you share. And that, in the end, is the most precious thing of all.
Towards midnight, it started raining. Oluchi woke up from her sleep and suddenly felt as if something had dropped on her body. She started having a strange itchy feeling. Oluchi could hear someone talking in her head. "You need it, go to his room and let him sleep with you." Once upon a time, in a small African city called Obu, there lived a young lady named Oluchi. She was the daughter of the pastor of the small church in Obu. Her father's name was Pastor Nduka and her mother's name was Nnenna. Oluchi was a well-brought-up girl from a godly family. Pastor Nduka preached about purity. He had married his wife as a virgin and desired for his daughter Oluchi to keep her virginity until marriage. From a young age, Oluchi was taught the importance of living a chaste life and keeping herself for her future husband as a respectable lady should. After completing her secondary education at the community college, Nduka enrolled Oluchi as an apprentice with a popular tailor to learn tailoring skills. This was to keep Oluchi busy and engaged while waiting for her to gain admission into the university. At the tailor's shop, Oluchi met a young lady about her age named Amaka. The two girls instantly became friends. After work each day, they would walk home together, chatting as they trek along the busy roads before bidding each other good night at the junction leading to their respective houses. Unlike Oluchi, Amaka did not live with her parents. Instead, she lived in a small house that had belonged to her late maternal grandmother. A few weeks after Oluchi started her tailoring training, one of her mother's friends named Ginika paid Oluchi's mother a visit one evening to warn her about Oluchi's new friend, Amaka. According to Ginika, Amaka was the daughter of a witch doctor named Ezemo. Rumors circulated that Ezemo had used his dark powers to kill Amaka's mother, which was the reason Amaka left her father's house to live alone after her mother's death. Ginika advised Nena to warn Oluchi to cut all ties of friendship with Amaka, the daughter of the evil witch doctor. When Oluchi returned home that day, her mother sat her down and told her everything Ginika had said about Amaka and the need for Oluchi to end their friendship immediately. However, for the first time in her life, Oluchi stood up to her mother and refused. "No, Mama, I don't care what you say about Amaka's father. Amaka is a good girl and an amazing friend. Nothing you say can make me end our friendship," Oluchi declared. With that, Oluchi continued her close friendship with Amaka. The two quickly became best friends, sharing secrets and everything else. As one of the good and well-behaved girls in the small city, the young prince named Chike took an interest in Oluchi and came to ask for her hand in marriage. Oluchi's parents were delighted at such an honor and gladly gave their blessing for the union. You see, Amaka also had a boyfriend named Ekele, who had promised to marry her as well. Amaka would visit Ekene during the weekends and spend the entire time with him. One afternoon, Amaka paid Ekele an unexpected visit at his house and was shocked to find him in bed with another girl. Over the years, Amaka had heard stories of Ekele's terrible reputation with being unfaithful to women and sleeping with anything under skirt. But she had never believed the rumors until this very moment when she saw the truth with her own eyes. In a burst of anger, Amaka threw the engagement ring Ekele had given to her a few weeks earlier down on the floor. She told him that it was over between them and stormed out of his house, utterly heartbroken. Amaka went back to the tailor's shop in tears, crying uncontrollably from the painful heartbreak. Oluchi did her best to console her friend, but Amaka only cried harder. On their walk home, Amaka narrated everything that had happened to Oluchi in more detail. Oluchi felt genuine pity for Amaka having to go through such an awful betrayal. She tried her best to cheer her friend up. "Amaka, this is not the end of the world," Oluchi assured her. "I am sure you will find a better man who will truly love and value you soon enough." Later that night, as Amaka sat on the bed in her small house, she began to remember all the good moments and memories she had shared with Ekele and his promises to make her his wife one day. Why should I allow just one incident of him cheating to ruin everything we had together? Perhaps I overreacted, Amaka thought out loud to herself. The next day, Oluchi was shocked when Amaka told her about her new plans to go back and beg Ekele for forgiveness, to take her back. "I think I overreacted, Oluchi," Amaka admitted. With that, she asked Oluchi to accompany her to Ekele's house, to apologize to him and take back the engagement ring she had thrown away in anger. Oluchi was not at all in support of the idea of Amaka going back to the same man who had cheated on her out of the blue without any signs of genuine remorse. But Amaka's heart was set, utterly infatuated, and she simply would not listen to Oluchi's voice of reason, warning against it. Amaka was determined to win back Ekele's affection, no matter what it took, despite his hurtful betrayal. The plan was that Oluchi would go in first to speak to Ekele on Amaka's behalf. Once she was able to convince Ekele and get him to agree to take her back, then Amaka would come in, and so the two young ladies set out together towards Ekele's house to put this plan to action. Once they arrived, Oluchi went inside alone, while Amaka waited under a tree beside the house as they had planned beforehand. Inside, Oluchi found Ekele looking incredibly sad and depressed, sitting on a mat, drinking some fresh palm wine. Oluchi greeted him politely and told him that she had come to talk to him about Amaka and the situation between them. Ekele welcomed her cordially and motioned to her to join him on the mat. He stood up briefly, heading into his small kitchen area. Unknown to Oluchi, inside the kitchen, Ekele opened a small pouch and added a mysterious powdery substance inside an empty cup before pouring some of the palm wine into that same cup. Ekele returned and handed the cup of palm wine over to Oluchi. She thanked him and took a sip of the tainted drink. And that was the last thing Oluchi could remember. Oluchi woke up some time later to find herself in a complete daze, lying on Ekele's bed in a devastated state, with her clothes scattered everywhere. It didn't take long for the sickening realization to hit her. Ekele slept with her and forcefully stripped her of her precious virginity. Just as Oluchi was trying to make sense of this horrifying situation, Amaka came bagging into the house. After growing impatient for waiting too long outside, Amaka was utterly shocked at the scene of her best friend Oluchi in such a compromising state on Ekele's bed. Before Oluchi could get a word out to explain, Amaka let out a piercing scream of anguish and betrayal. "You evil man, you forced yourself on me and took my virginity, all my pride and purity," Oluchi cried, Amaka's face contorted with rage. "You lying, deceitful snake. I knew you were flirty, but I never imagined you would stoop this low. Our friendship is over, you disgraceful harlot." And with that, Amaka whirled around and stormed back out of the house, leaving a traumatized Oluchi behind in her wake. Despite the false assumption and misunderstandings, Oluchi could not find it within herself to go chasing after Amaka to try explaining what had really happened. She felt so ashamed, dirty, and utterly devastated over having her innocence stolen in such a cruel way. In the days that followed, Oluchi became very different from her usual self. She always looked sad and withdrawn. However, she could not bring herself to tell her parents that she had lost her virginity, the most precious thing they wanted her to keep until marriage. Her father would see her as a worthless trash if he found out. What use is a girl who is no longer a virgin? Oluchi thought about the prince. Would he still want to marry her if this got out? So many thoughts ran through Oluchi's mind. Oh, what about Amaka? Would she understand that Oluchi was also a victim here? Would Amaka ever forgive her? Oluchi cried. The next day, Oluchi decided to visit Amaka to at least explain what really happened to her. As soon as Amaka saw Oluchi coming towards her house, she quickly chased her away. "How dare you show your face here, you little harlot!" Amaka shouted as she chased Oluchi out of her house, not wanting to hear what Oluchi had come to say. After Oluchi left, Amaka continued thinking about the perfect way to deal with Oluchi. "I will visit my father, and you will become the harlot that you truly are," Amaka concluded. That evening, Ezemo was seated in his shrine and was shocked to see his daughter Amaka standing at the door after so many years. In tears, Amaka told her father how the person she considered her best friend had betrayed her by taking away her future husband. "Father, I want you to make that harlot a public toilet for all the men in the village," Amaka said. "Ha ha ha!" Ezemo laughed. "Truly, a lion cannot give birth to a goat." "Amaka, you are truly your father's daughter," Ezemo continued. "Now take this calabash and call her name into it 3 times, and your wish will be granted, my daughter. In 3 days, she will become even worse than a harlot, running after all the men in the village," Ezemo assured his daughter. After trying in vain to beg Amaka for forgiveness, Oluchi decided she could not live in guilt forever. She must continue her life, whether a virgin or not. 3 days later, the prince paid a visit to Oluchi and her parents. He expressed his desire to take Oluchi to the palace to meet his parents and spend some time with them before the wedding. Oluchi's parents agreed it was a brilliant idea, and excited Oluchi packed a few belongings and followed the prince to the palace to meet his parents, the king and the queen. Upon arriving at the palace, Prince Chike introduced Oluchi to his parents, and they were delighted to meet her and impressed with their son's choice of a wife. "Ah, the pastor's daughter," the king said excitedly. After dinner, they all said goodnight, and Oluchi was shown into a very beautiful room where she will be staying during her time at the palace. Towards midnight, it started raining. Oluchi woke up from her sleep and suddenly felt as if something had dropped on her body. She started having a strange itchy feeling. Oluchi could hear someone talking in her head. "You need it, go to his room and let him sleep with you," the voice said. And so Oluchi stood up, as if being controlled. She left her room and went into the prince's room. "I am good," she said, shaken. The prince held her in a warm embrace, hoping it would somehow keep her warm. But then Oluchi started moving her hands down his body. The prince was surprised at first because he was told that Oluchi was a virgin, and he intended to keep it that way until their wedding night. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked. "Yes, my prince," Oluchi replied, and so he slept with her. However, it didn't end there, as Oluchi kept asking for more and more until dawn. By daybreak, the prince was exhausted and tired, but Oluchi was still ready to go on. "What manner of a lady is this?" the prince asked. The frustrated prince took Oluchi out of the palace without saying a word to the king and queen. He took her straight back to her father's house and told them that the wedding was off and left. When her parents asked Oluchi what went wrong at the palace, she lied to them that the prince was angry because she refused to allow him to touch her. "You have done well, my daughter. Do not compromise your purity for anyone, prince or not," Unduka said and hugged his daughter proudly. The next day, on her way to the tailor's shop, the strange itchy feeling and the strange voice in her head started again. "Oluchi, you need a man now," it thundered. Just then, she sighted someone coming from the other side of the road. It was Kalu, a young man who had asked her out months ago, but she turned him down. Kalu was surprised to see Oluchi smiling at him, unlike her usual frown when she asked him to leave her alone. Before Kalu knew what was happening, Oluchi had hugged him tightly. Kalu quickly seized the opportunity, took her to a nearby bush and slept with her. But Oluchi was not satisfied. She kept on demanding for more until Kalu ran for his dear life. And so she continued, moving from one man to another, begging them to sleep with her. But no one could satisfy her. Soon rumors began spreading about Oluchi, the harlot that no man could satisfy. Word got to Unduka, but he refused to believe what they are saying about his daughter. "These are unbelievable lies. My daughter is a good girl," he would say. Oluchi knew she needed help, but who would she run to? Her parents would be heartbroken to find out about her activities with men. She just hoped that one day the itch and everything would stop. One fateful night, Oluchi woke up with the strange itch again. She needed a man as soon as possible, but it was late into the night. The only man nearby was her father. The itch became so intense that Oluchi quietly sneaked into her father's room with tears in her eyes, begging him to sleep with her. Unduka was dumbfounded. It was all true after all. "You foul spirit, in the name above every other name, I command you to come out of her." Unduka started praying fervently. Nena woke up and joined them, and they all prayed till daybreak. By morning, Unduka called some of his trusted church members. They continued praying until the evil spirit that Amaka's father had sent to Oluchi's body left, and she was delivered to the glory of God. Months later, Oluchi got admitted into the university in the big city and left the small city for school, leaving all the awful experiences behind. During her final year, Oluchi met a young man named Afam. They fell in love and he soon asked her for her hand in marriage. After graduation, Oluchi and Afam got married and she moved to the big city to live with her husband. However, Oluchi and Afam constantly visited Obu to see her parents. On one of their visits, Oluchi saw a mad young woman begging for alms on the road. When she stopped to give her something, she instantly recognized who it was: Amaka.
Once upon a time, in an African village called Owo-Oke, there lived a lady named Iyabo. In this village, a woman's beauty was defined by how slender her waist was. The slimmer a woman's waist, the more attractive she was considered by the men. When Iyabo was a little girl, she had a normal weight just like every other girl her age. However, as she grew older, she developed an uncontrollable eating habit. There was no portion of food that Iyabo could not finish. She would clear her plate in no time, no matter how much food she was served. It was not long before she became the fattest lady in the entire village of Owo-Oke. As Iyabo gained more and more weight, all the men in the village stopped admiring her or even asking her out on dates. One by one, all her female friends got married, leaving only the fat Iyabo still living in her father's house, growing older with each passing day. Her father, Mr. Shogun, became very worried that his daughter would never find a husband. Iyabo's younger sisters had all gotten married and were living happily with their husbands. Only Iyabo was left behind, still single and unmarried. This weighed heavily on Mr. Shogun's mind. As the caring father that he was, he took it upon himself to look for a suitable husband for his daughter Iyabo before it was too late. One day, Mr. Shogun heard that the son of one of his good friends, a young man named Tayo, who had just returned to the village after living in the city for many years, was looking to take a wife. Excited at this golden opportunity, Mr. Shogun quickly told his friend all about his daughter Iyabo. A date was fixed for Tayo to come and meet Iyabo with the intent of possibly marrying her. When Iyabo heard about the potential husband visiting, she was overjoyed. Could this finally be her chance to get married, like all her friends and sisters? The night before Tayo's visit, the excited Iyabo spent hours dressing and grooming herself beautifully in preparation to meet her would-be husband. The next day, Tayo arrived at Iyabo's family compound. But as soon as he set his eyes on the very fat Iyabo, his face fell in disappointment. This was clearly not the beautiful woman he had imagined marrying. "I cannot marry this mountain of a woman," Tayo said rudely, staring at Iyabo's large body in disgust. Without another word, he turned and left the compound. Iyabo was utterly heartbroken. All the joy and excitement she had felt moments ago faded away instantly. She went back to her room, locked the door, and cried uncontrollably for days. "I will die single and alone. No man will ever want to marry me," she cried over and over again. After spending days cooped up crying in her room, Iyabo finally got tired of hiding away and feeling depressed. There had to be a solution to her problem, she thought. She knew exactly where to turn. She would visit the great river goddess. Iyabo left the house and walked through the village until she reached the river's edge. Taking a deep breath, she called out in a loud voice, "Great river goddess, please hear my call and comfort. I am in dire need of your assistance." As if by magic, the river surface began to bubble and churn. Then an incredibly beautiful woman with shining blue skin emerged from the churning waters. It was the river goddess herself. "What can I do for you, young lady?" the river goddess asked. "Please, great goddess, make me slim and beautiful like the other ladies my age," Iyabo pleaded, tears filling her eyes again. "All the men in the village have rejected me because of my body size. All my friends are married, and here I am, still unwanted and alone. Please help me become slim so I can find a husband to marry me, I beg of you."
The river goddess regarded Iyabo with a look of pity and understanding. My dear, you are beautiful just the way you are. You must learn to love yourself, despite what others may think. However, I will assist you. Before the next market day, you will find a man who will love you, cherish you, and take you as his wife. This I promise. Iyabo thought about what the river goddess had said. The promise of finally finding a husband was thrilling, but this was not enough for Iyabo anymore. Her face hardened with hatred and anger. First, she began, I want all the men in this village that rejected and humiliated me all these years to suffer. I want them to pay for all the pain that they put me through with their cruel words and look of disgust. The river goddess was silent for a moment. Then she simply said, It is done. Your wish is granted. The next morning, a great confusion broke out in the village of Owo-Oke. All the men awoke to find their manhoods had completely vanished overnight. No explanation could be found for why their male organs had mysteriously disappeared. Panicked, the men rushed to consult the village juju priest, a man considered to have great mystical powers and knowledge of the spirit world. It was he who gave the men the shocking answer for their plight after consulting his oracle. It is Iyabo, the fat woman, who has taken away all your manholes as an act of revenge for the humiliation and rejection she had suffered at your hands for so many years, the juju priest proclaimed. The only way for your manhoods to be restored is for every man to sleep with Iyabo. Until then, you all will remain as you are, incomplete men. A collective groan went through the crowd of men as they realized their fate. The juju priest's words were absolute. If they wanted to be made whole again, they would have to sleep with the fattest, most undesirable woman in the village. It was a devastating blow to their egos, but the men had no choice. One by one, they lined up outside Iyabo's hut, waiting for their turn to sleep with the woman they had scorned for so long. Surprisingly, despite their initial repulsion, Iyabo appeared instantly attractive to the men the moment they stepped into her hut to lay with her. The men would literally spend hours upon hours copulating with Iyabo. Their manhoods will become energetic and insatiable when with her, yet totally inactive and limp when they try to lay with their wives or any other woman in the village. They were powerless against the hold Iyabo had over them. For Iyabo, it was a total bliss and vindication. This was everything she had always dreamed about, to be desired by every man, to be seen as the most beautiful and lusted after woman in the village instead of a fat, undesirable one. The wives tried everything to lure their husbands back, even threatening to leave them, but the men simply could not pull themselves away from Iyabo's intoxicating and bewitching spell. After many days of torment, the fed-up wives finally went to the juju priest, demanding that he must find a way to break their husbands free from Iyabo's curse and restore their manhoods once and for all. There must be some kind of counter spell that can overpower this dark magic Iyabo has employed. They pleaded with the juju priest. Our homes and families are being torn apart. You have to help us. The juju priest, taking pity on these women, cast his bones and consulted his mystical oracle once more. After several long moments and some wiggling of his nose, he finally spoke. Yes, there is a way to break this curse over your husbands, he said. You must take this pot that possesses ancient magic. He handed the wives a small pot. Spray the contents around Iyabo's hut, and she will fall into a deep sleep. Then chant this counter curse phrase I will teach you. The spell over your men will be dissolved. Their manhoods and ability to desire other women will instantly be restored. The wives crushed the pot in their hands, like it was the most precious jewel in the world. They quickly learned the counter curse phrase from the juju priest, thanking him for his help. That night, while the men were once again in Iyabo's hut, the wives set their plan into motion. Under the darkness, they crept into Iyabo's compound silently, With steady hands, the wives carefully spread the white powder in the pot around Iyabo's hut. Inside, Iyabo lay in the center of the hut, on a mat, deep asleep, surrounded by the slumbering body of their husbands and lover. Then quickly they chanted the ancient counter-curse phrase 3 times, just as the juju priest had instructed. At first, nothing seemed to happen. But then the men woke up, shaking their heads as if waking from a trance. Their eyes went wide as they realized where they were and what they had been doing. "My wife, forgive me. I did not mean to stray." Some dark power was controlling me. They started exclaiming as they rushed back to their respective wives' arms. The spell had indeed been broken. Word spread rapidly through the village of the curse being dissolved and Iyabo's hold over the men destroyed. The husbands and wives rejoiced in being reunited again. As for Iyabo, she awoke the next day feeling confused and dizzy, with no memory of the previous night's event. When she tried calling out to the men who had so eagerly satisfied her desire just a day ago, she was met with silence. The men had all returned to their wives, refusing to look even in Iyabo's direction now that her spell over them had been broken. Realizing that the curse she had enacted upon the village menfolk through the river goddess had somehow been undone, Iyabo knew there was only one person who could provide answers. She had to return to the river and try to find the river goddess once more. Without wasting time, Iyabo ran through the village to the river bank. When she arrived, she began to call out the river goddess' name. "Great river goddess, please come forth and speak to me. I am in need of your assistance." But despite Iyabo's repeated pleas, the river goddess did not appear. She cried out for what felt like days, sitting by the river banks, but the river goddess never showed herself. Iyabo could not understand why the river goddess had abandoned her. Was it because the river goddess was angered that the curse she enacted had been broken? Was it her wish for all the men to desire her instead of finding a husband she had always wanted? As the days turned into weeks, Iyabo was forced to accept the harsh reality. The river goddess will never appear to her again. The bitterly disappointed and heartbroken woman had no choice but to return to her village with no answer and no prospect of ever finding a husband. Iyabo realized too late that she should have stuck to her initial wish to simply find a husband rather than bewitch lust. Her moment of vengeance and her greed for more had cost her the chance at a real loving marriage that the river goddess seemed to have been offering. And so it was that for the rest of her days, Iyabo lived out her life as the village's loneliest fat woman. The story of Iyabo is a morality tale. It is an example of how destructive anger, greed, and obsession over societal beauty standards could be if left to fester on one's heart. Though Iyabo was a victim of cruelty for years due to her body size and shape, her lashing out in such a spiteful way brought her no true happiness or fulfillment in the end. The lesson from this story can be found in the book of Proverbs, chapter 4, verse 23. It says, "Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life." Thanks for watching, and I will see you in my next story.